In this episode, we speak with Tre Sayle, a partner at Thoma Bravo, where he leads the firm's growth investment strategy. Tre led growth investments in FTX, Illumio, and ServiceTitan, along with several other notable companies. Thoma Bravo is one of the most successful software investment firms in the world, with over 40 years of experience and more than $100 billion in assets under management. Throughout Tre's 16-plus year career at Thoma Bravo, he has been instrumental in orchestrating over 22 deals representing approximately $50 billion of transaction value. Tre was named a top 25 software investor by GrowthCap in 2021. We hope you enjoy the show. Tre, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. It's a delight to be with you. Would love to start off with your journey actually at Thoma Bravo. You've been there for a number of years, a long number of years, and you've seen it grow over time. So would love to start there.
Perfect. And it's a pleasure joining this, and I'm flattered for you including me in this podcast. And yeah, happy to handle any kind of questions or topics. But for me personally, I joined Thoma Bravo. It's actually a different name at the time, just shows how long I've been here, back in 2005, which is 17 years running for those of you counting. And as you know, in investor world, that's multiple lifetimes to spend at one individual place. I'm very proud of what I've watched transpire and the elements that I've been able to participate in. But obviously a good group of people here that make this very fun and enjoyable. Before that, I did a couple of years of investment banking, but it's a pretty unexotic career given how long I've been here. But to your point, I was able to join at the kind of the dawn of our software investing experience. We did our first transaction in January of 2003. So we're about 20 years almost in the nose running right now in terms of software only investing. Once we got a taste of that first investment in software, it was a vertical market ERP company called Profit 21, sold to made-to-order manufacturing. So even very niche within a vertical. And we were able to help the company identify some efficiency gains through thinking a lot smarter about their operations. And then we did a series of M&A deals, all within a period of about 9 months, and recognized tremendous progress that the company had made, and realized very quickly that the things that we were doing with that business were not so specific to that business that couldn't be replicated across any software market. And therein lies how we got conviction right away to just rip the Band-Aid off. And we were looking at other business services and other areas. Just everybody jumped into software almost immediately and started running with it. When I joined, we had just agreed on a LOI with our fourth software deal. And of course, now today that number is in the hundreds. And if you include add-on acquisitions, we've done close to 600 deals of materiality here at Thoma Bravo in software.
And speaking to how everyone jumped in at that time, can you compare how competitive it was then to how competitive it is now to get deals done in the software market?
Yeah, it is. That's changed tremendously. There was a small cast of characters that were ready to do, which at that point was kind of mid-market. This wasn't like bigger, large cap, if you want to call it that, transactions, but in that mid-market, there were a small handful generally located here in the Bay Area, in the San Francisco Bay Area. Some have even went on to do consumer retail and got out of software because they hated the fact of how competitive it became. They wanted to find the next uncompetitive environment, if you will. But yes, that has changed. And I mean, the length, I measure it sometimes. The metric I use is what are the windows for getting deals done now? We used to work on a deal for 5 or 6 months, like literally that long, like diligence, watch 2 quarters. That's now compressed into, within reason, 2 to 3 weeks. Like that 5 to 6 months is now 2 to 3 weeks. So that gives you, I think, a good understanding of just how competitive things have become. And, as other firms become much more familiar with the software market, they're able to act quicker and believe in their instincts and some of their recent experiences to say that, hey, I'm willing to make that bet, even on maybe a 70% baked, kind of work product, it's enough for me. Mm-hmm. So yes, it's gotten very, very competitive over time.
And Thoma Bravo has become one of the, top names when it comes to software investing. What do you think has enabled you and the firm to succeed over such a long time frame? And maybe this gets to some of the value that you provide to the companies you invest in.
Honestly, it's in a kind of a global sense, it's sticking to the script. Our firm has never pivoted, reinvented. You could think of whatever kind of verb or adjective you want to use to describe those that changed themselves over time. We've been hard and fast at the same principles, since we got started. And many of those principles, we were fortunate at the time, we learned from some operators who had tremendous experience, not just in software, but tech broadly for a couple decades. And we were students of what made those individuals very successful as operators and learned very quickly how we could be partners to management. And what I mean specifically by that is a lot of, I think the belief out there is that there's a lot of like analysis and who's got a better model than somebody else or something. Of course, it goes well beyond that. If you flip to the other side and say, well, what are like more qualitative, maybe even some personal side of things that make investors successful? Always been really, really good at listening to management teams first. Don't assume we know any better than somebody who's been running a company for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. I mean, ought to state the obvious, they know their business better than we do. Once we feel like we're immersed as much as we can be with an understanding from their lens, them being a CEO or an executive team at a business, then how can we use what I call our AI/ML of our 600 deals over 20 years to then fit in to where they see gaps or blind spots or challenges or opportunities that they never really figured out to take advantage of, and be and sometimes rifle shot into those areas and dive in with our experience. And, while some software companies think, and I mean this in a positive sense for a lot of entrepreneurs and founders and management teams, that their struggles or their things they're focused on are different or special to them, the reality is they're typically not. And it's something that somebody has grappled with at some point in the past where we have been a part of that decisioning. And to be honest, sometimes we made mistakes, right? In the past, we very quickly learned we will avoid that kind of decision in the future. But more fortunately, more often than not, and thankfully way more often than not, we did something right. And then we're able to replicate that at the next business that we're working with, or the next management team that we're partnering with. And so again, using that as our guide of listening to management teams talk about their business and figuring out how we can use our experience level to sort of fit in has been the framework that's made us, very successful. I would also just add on that we're a fantastic combination of strategic and operational investors. And specifically what I mean by that is on the strategic side, help companies think about, from a roadmap perspective or things that often fall in the product management function. What's the vision for where this business should go? How can we get there? Is it better to buy that company or should we organically build this on our own? How can we put that together in terms of business combinations and then in working with them on that? And so we're very helpful strategically thinking through that and and then there's partnerships and everything else that falls into that kind of category of strategic thinking. And then on the operational side, and that's the other part of the coin here, is again that AI/ML of learning over and over again best-in-class operations and then being able to offer those sorts of experiences to management teams. None of us are rocket scientists. We're really good at pattern recognition. And we've surrounded ourselves with some world-class operators who felt like it was a time in their career to step aside from the CEO or CFO or operating role that they were in and work with a portfolio of companies. And that's what they enjoy doing and serving as management partners. So it's that, sorry for the very long answer there, but I think it's important. That's a big part of our heritage. And that's always been the principles of how we've operated.
Now, you're currently invested in a good number of companies and you have a lot of capital to deploy. So how do you go about the process from beginning to end of identifying from identification all the way to commitment? Do you have kind of a set number of kind of verticals within software that you're consistently paying attention to and monitoring certain companies, and then you kind of act at the appropriate time? How do you run an efficient investment process?
Great question. So we look at anything that's in software. So just starting again at a 10,000 foot level, and then we'll zone in on a few areas. What that means for us is anything that we use software a little bit more liberally as a term where I think others might not necessarily consider some of the businesses we look at as software. That includes things like tech-enabled services, anything that uses source code as its critical IP or sort of crown jewel. And I think of we own an internet company that uses its own AI/ML to target ads for people viewing its site. We consider that actually to fall into the software category. So again, anything that falls into that definition, The one area perhaps we haven't been as active in is in business to consumer B2C area, which is a small part of the software market. Almost all of it at some level is sort of B2B as it is. And so we don't do as much there. But that's a pretty huge remit. Like B2B software and tech-enabled services, very, very big area. And so, I would further sort of break it down into, categories that we're very much interested in. We separate, actually, maybe the way I'll address the question is this. We separate the world into 4 categories here at Thoma Bravo. Vertical market applications. I mentioned our first deal was a ERP system for made-to-order manufacturing. Great example. Vertical market application. Horizontal applications. Is there an HR solution, as an example, that goes horizontally that business users, someone who runs chief people officer or someone in HR would interact with every day? The next one is security, which speaks for itself. I think everyone sort of understands the security software market. And finally, infrastructure, which includes things like modern data stack, application development, other sort of technology sold specifically to the IT groups. And so that's how we organize ourselves across all our different funds that we're investing. And we get very granular in terms of our understanding of the companies in these spaces, the prevailing trends, sort of where the puck is going, and form our own judgments with those groups within those different silos. And then obviously, do our best to pick what we believe are market leaders in markets with great tailwinds. As you can appreciate, once you go down the roots of the tree, they spread and you get into much different silos. And we do have to make decisions on where we think that there's a better use of our time than others. But hopefully that's a good kind of framework of how we look at things and where we kind of spend our time. And I would say finally that the last couple of things, growth is a huge part of what we're doing, whether it's a buyout deal or the fund that I'm responsible for here in Thoma Bravo and share with the other senior team that work in it, minority growth equity investing. And so we're always looking for growth regardless of what pocket of capital is coming in. And so that's another element, that comes with our investment strategy. And finally, I would say this is coming back to kind of the personal side of things. We have to find teams that see us as valuable and believe in a dialogue and meaning we are not just money. There's lots of money still, even with markets whipping around, people being a little bit more scrutinizing of different things they're doing. There's still a tremendous amount of capital and liquidity out there to go around, where we see that there's a partnership and we can learn from management, and management actually vice versa would like to learn a few things perhaps from us. Fantastic, kind of setup for us. And that's where we can actually then do what we do best, which is find incremental growth opportunities very quickly with management teams that are desirous of having that kind of input.
And for the benefit of our audience that are trying to understand Thoma Bravo better, you have various funds that you invest out of. So when you're investing, which fund is that coming out of? And can you kind of describe some of the other pockets of capital within the firm?
Yeah. It used to be very simple. In the beginning, there was one fund, and it was sort of one fund, that just looked at the available opportunity set.
One area that I think is particularly interesting to especially the younger generation of growth investors that's coming up, and maybe they're running their own fund, 500 million to 2 billion, is how a firm like Thoma Bravo has been able to build over time. And I think this is getting to the culture. What's special about the culture of Thoma Bravo?
Yeah, I think you're hitting on something that's very important. Since the moment I joined, we had a San Francisco office doing this onset of software investing, and there was maybe 8 of us, working together. And when you have 8 people, and our funds weren't large back then, but we were still covering a completely untouched market, greenfield, meaning like not many, as I said, there were only a few of us doing software investing that far back. We might have even been one of the first to actually do a software deal, at least a software take private, just kind of goes, nothing had been sort of like addressed yet in terms of the market opportunity. So as 8 people, of different seniority had to go kind of attack, this market. And what happens in those scenarios is it becomes incredibly flat. Like I mentioned the word hierarchy, but like you would come in each day, and it's not like in my investment banking analyst days where those of us who kind of went through that training, it was very rigid, hierarchical. You were very much counted on for your own opinion, how you're going to spend your time, which companies you decided to raise and elevate to the broader committee or team. And that has never changed when we've gone from 8 to 150 people, investment professionals. And it's still an incredibly flat, scrappy, kind of relentless group that when we see opportunities that we think fit, some of the criteria I talked about earlier that are and provide for great partnerships, we're sort of all over it. And we don't rely on the super senior individual or anybody for that matter to kind of drive things. Everybody's kind of held accountable. And I think that makes it a super uplifting experience for people of all different levels here and ages. And they feel like they're really contributing to something every step of the way. So I think that's been a real critical part of our secret sauce.
And are there any specific areas of software that really excite you right now?
Yeah, it's like a parent, you love all your children. It's hard to sort of distinguish necessarily. We've always had an affinity for security, and security is a massive market. So that's a loaded statement, right? Like, what kind of security? There's plenty that, again, we can go down a few rat holes in terms of talking about areas of security that we're particularly excited about. But with cloud and SaaS being the prevailing form factor going forward, there's a lot of new opportunities for securing those applications or the infrastructure, the cloud infrastructure behind it. And so I think that's an interesting area, but that doesn't come at the expense of saying that more traditional identity and access management, things like that, are no longer kind of as interesting. There's still plenty of interesting things and innovation happening there as well. Another area is, as I mentioned earlier, like modern data stack. I've been super excited and impressed by some of the entrepreneurialism that's happened in new database technologies that are purpose-built for specific types of applications, real-time, internal use cases, external use cases. And the innovation there has been just tremendous. And I actually think we haven't even scratched the surface of what applications will be capable of doing in 5 years because of this database or infrastructure technology sort of underlying these applications, and how much can be done in real time. It's amazing. So that's another area that's quite exciting to us. And we're always interested. I mean, fintech has always been a super innovative space as well, as we've seen just at every level. I wouldn't even know where to begin in that. But, one thing I'll highlight is in the crypto world as well. And it's not something that, a year ago, I would have woken up and have said that Thoma Bravo was going to have a exposure to crypto-related businesses. But man, we're big believers in that market, specifically the infrastructure, as opposed to the actual currencies themselves. But exchanges, custodians, staking partners, the list kind of goes on and on and on. There's just a tremendous economy that's being built real time. It's just kind of taken off in a very special way in the last 2 years. It's been around since 2007, crypto as an idea, or currency for that matter. But now the plumbing is in place that can really grow that business. And the use cases for that are obviously expanding rapidly. So that's just a flavor of some things that are really interesting to us.
Got it. Before I hop into my final two questions, just want to touch on ESG and hear a little bit about how Thoma Bravo is approaching ESG and kind of the level of activity you have in that area.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something our firm takes incredibly seriously. And we actually have, individuals essentially on our staff right now, dedicated to programs, geared towards ESG topics. As you know, ESG has become a very large, set of considerations, from things that involve obviously environmental. Most clearly, it's manifested in social and everything in between. I would say some of the programs I'm really thrilled about. One that's worked particularly well, and like anything, we've had a lot of initiatives. I would say some have worked better than others, but the spirit has all been the same, right? Of trying to make the right kind of impact on a more social level. But we actually went for tech is becoming such, obviously, a driving force and bigger part of the economy every day. And software is a huge part of the kind of tech movement. And that's a skill set that people who have the opportunity to work, not in the investment firms, not like at Thoma Bravo, but at software companies, and actually understand how a software business operates, have an opportunity to realize what these software platforms are doing for their end customers and expose them to that. We put in place some programs for typically younger individuals that are misrepresented at this point in time in tech, quite frankly. And tech is, from a socioeconomic perspective, not on purpose, has kind of looked more uniform historically. And that's changing, and we want to be an agent to expedite that change even further and faster. And so we have a program that I'm really proud of actually placing individuals directly into the companies that are investments of ours. So specifically, that's one that I'm very proud of. There have been, again, many other things, even outside of the social realm, more focused on environmental elements as well. But that one in particular, I've been seeing work really, really well, and was thrilled the last time we had a kind of an update internally on it. Was really impressed with the success we're having there.
Great. Final two questions. Can you tell us about a person that you admire? It could be a leader in a specific area of expertise. It could be, a traditional CEO. It could be someone in sports or politics? Anyone, someone you think very highly of?
Yeah, it's a good question. I promise this will be the corniest response, and it'll sound like I purposely give it thought and placed this way. And I did give it thought before this call about this. I am most fond of our CEO partners. And that's why I say it's corny, because of course you'd say that. But let me obviously describe in a little bit more detail. The partners that we work with, whether it's in our minority growth equity fund or our private equity funds and everything in between, they made a conscious decision amidst a lot of alternatives to work with someone like ourselves, knowing the fruits of working with someone like us involved really pinging us and asking us for feedback on things. And that takes a level of humility and an openness to others' perspectives that, I think sometimes lacks in pockets of broader tech. Some entrepreneurs have been so successful and done so well that it's sometimes hard to naturally open up and actually solicit kind of feedback, from other people. It seems like it's something that everybody should do, but it doesn't actually come naturally to every leader that's out there. And so the leaders that are, willing to listen and have and open up to other perspectives and actually think about actually giving that a chance and running with some of these different ideas, I'm very impressed with leaders that are capable of doing that. And those are the types of people that we've been partnering with and run our companies that we're involved with today. So as corny as that is, it is the truth. I don't have like a historical figure that I've often thought long and hard about, my whole life as a, particularly fantastic leader. There's certainly, a handful of people I've been really impressed with, but because I've also never gotten to know any of them personally, and I've gotten to know the people who run our companies personally, that's also why I gravitate towards that as an answer.
Excellent. Last question is, can you tell us about a book you would recommend to the audience?
Yeah, I was thinking about this a little bit earlier. I'm not, admittedly, I wish I was much more well-read for some of the great, literature that's out there today, written by, CEOs, ex-CEOs, some fantastic stuff. I get stuff recommended all the time. In fact, I have a list of the problems. I haven't actually gotten to them. I'm usually a more tactical reader about very short articles and things of that nature. But I will say categorically, what I do enjoy is reading contrarian views on things. That stuff is always really interesting to me, where there are authors, whether they're bona fide authors of actual literature books or, columnists or anything like that in between, but are willing to kind of step outside and provide rationale and the like for contrarian views on things, I think are really interesting. And that's not because we are a contrarian investor by nature, but you should always be challenging your thoughts and the direction you're going, not so you feel uncertain about what you're doing, but always thinking about what could happen. And then that helps inform how you stay on your toes going forward and course correct if need be. So I'm always inspired by those things, but I'm also into humor and love reading my kids. My daughter's into Captain Underpants. And there's nothing to really wean from that book other than never take yourself too seriously. I think that's all you can wean from that. But it's stuff like that I find, hilarious. It's actually brought me a lot closer to my kids as they've been growing up, and we find interesting things to read together. But that's the closest I get to books.
Right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time, Tre. I know our audience will find this very insightful.
Awesome. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me. And yeah, it's been great getting an opportunity to chat and get to know you.
Thank you.